Americans look at things simplistically, like chess, and you're playing five-dimensional chess. We don't understand they are a revolutionary Islamist Shiite 12er ideology that, if they could, would take over the whole world, not just Israel, not just the Sunni world, the whole world.
Exactly.
And if you read what they say, they're pretty clear about it.
They are.
Believe, when your adversaries say things, believe it.
Yeah.
And let's say they put 10 ballistic missiles they send all 2,000. One's going to get through, and you don't have to be precise.
Right. Not with a nuclear weapon. Reporting from Jerusalem for EndTimes.com, this is Brian Schrauger. This week's report is one of the most interesting and informative interviews I have done. Today, we meet up with Dr. Eric Mandel. Eric is an intriguing person. Not only is he a board-certified eye surgeon, he's also an advisor to leaders in the United States and Israel, helping both sides of the world understand each other. More than 2 oceans separate Washington and Jerusalem. While both sides share many ideals, there is a big difference between the way the West and the Middle East view the world. Eric's job is helping each side better understand the other from its different perspective. Over the years, as an eye surgeon, Eric's passion to correct distorted vision has always included a mission to help the West and the Middle East to clearly see each other. Today, Eric's primary focus, so to speak, is directing the Middle East Political Information Network. MEPIN, M-E-P-I-N in short, is a consulting firm for both business and government leaders in Israel's neck of the world. He is also a prolific journalist, publishing in as many as 24 media outlets. Included in his roles as a journalist, he is the senior security editor for the Jerusalem Report and a regular contributor to The Hill and the Jerusalem Post. Of special interest, Eric regularly spoke with senior advisors on both campaigns during this year's U.S. presidential campaign. At the same time, he was meeting with Israeli intelligence, defense, and political leaders both in and out of government. Going into this interview, I thought our only focus would be Eric's thoughts about the impact of U.S. Israeli relations after the dramatic win of Donald Trump as the returning and next President of the United States of America. How will this affect Israel's wars with Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, IRGC operatives in Iraq and Syria, terror cells in the Palestinian territories, and of course, Iran? Will Israel be hindered or helped by President Joseph Biden in his remaining lame duck months in office? During that same period, until his inauguration on January 2025, how will the conduct of President-elect Donald Trump impact the Jewish state? Will Israel attack Iran's nuclear program, its oil industry? Will it attempt to overthrow the current Islamic regime in Iran? Will peace break out in Lebanon and in Gaza? What are Israel's enemies likely to do? All of these things are discussed. What I did not expect was Eric's dramatic story of his experience on 7 October 2023 when Israel was assaulted by rampaging, murderous members of Hamas. As a result of Eric's 7 October account and our subsequent discussion about Israel under President-elect Donald Trump, this is a somewhat longer than usual report. Every part of it, however, is important, and as I'm sure you will find, it is fascinating. Join me then as together we sit down for a compelling conversation with Dr. Eric Mandel. Thank you, Eric. This is really great. Thank you for meeting with me. You are in Florida, is that correct?
right now until I leave tomorrow for Israel.
Oh, you do? Oh, that was my next question. I wondered when you were coming back. You and I met at a barbecue hosted by our mutual friend Seth Franzman, and we have periodically met there. So hopefully we will see each other again very, very soon. Oh, that's great. I knew you were coming back sometime. I didn't know it was so soon.
Time number 7 since October 7th.
Wow. That leads to a question, because I know that you've been here several times since the attack on 7 October 2023, and you were in communities where the slaughters took place. What did you see, and when were you there?
So I was in a sleepy little town called Yerucham in the Negev, and the alarms went off around 6:30 in the morning, the sirens.
Oh, you were there when it happened.
Yeah. It was Saturday morning. I was visiting with friends and family, not my family, their family that was there. And you saw, it was sort of in the beginning, because it was Simchat Torah. So it was, and it was a Sabbath, it was Shabbat. And so, nobody knew exactly what was going on. You went to synagogue, and then there were echoes of 1973. And the reason I said that was you saw people running out at 9 in the morning, 10 in the morning, with their talesim on, running out to get into cars, which is not something you normally see on a holiday or Shabbat, and leaving and, running around. And things were a little crazy. So I called Seth and I said, something's going on in Gaza. We really didn't have much information. And I said, let's go and see. And we had no idea the hornet's nest that we were heading towards. So Seth left from Jerusalem, and I went from Yerucham. And how I survived and did not get killed is a miracle. God was watching for me, because I drove up the road, the eastern road of Gaza, all the way to Sderot. Seth, and when I say we drove in, the road was empty. I got in, I think, just above where the Nova Festival was, and some of the kibbutzim were being attacked. There was only maybe 1 or 2 cars I saw on my whole ride. And I drove right into Sderot. That's where we decided to meet. Seth couldn't get in that day. The roads, they already started to block. For me, I didn't see a single Israeli soldier until much later in the afternoon. So I drove into Sderot. And I didn't know what I was going to see. And the first thing I see is a motorcycle on its side with a body with a white cloth on it. And it's like, it's now surreal. Now, I'm a surgeon. I've seen death before, so it's not like, but it was a surreal scene. And I'm looking, and there's just a couple of kind of panicked people in the streets. I had no idea at that time Hamas was in Sderot. I had no idea they were taking over the police station. And so I drove further, and I see a van that was smashed up with another body on the side.
Oh, my
and
word.
There were a couple of, I'll say, police, and almost looked like forensic people looking and taking pictures as if it was almost a car accident. And then I drove further to this interchange. Actually, before I got there, what was really bizarre, there was a supermarket that was bullet written, and there was a recording blaring out. And the weird thing was, and this is Sderot, where there's not much English usually heard, the recording was blaring in English.
Oh.
We have a fire, everyone leave the building. And it was just bizarre. So then I went further with my car, and I had stopped because now I came upon another scene of the massacre, where there were, and this was, I'll say they looked more like border police kinds. They were not Sahal. And basically, they wouldn't let me go any further. And, I waited the afternoon to see if, when the army would show up. And it didn't show up until late afternoon. Wow. So on my way back, I was going to go to Ofakim. I had no idea that was under attack also. I figured it was farther enough away and just see what's going on. But it was getting dark because, of the time, the year was getting dark a little earlier. And it's already now after 5 or 6, so I forgot what time it was. And I headed back. And then the next day, I went back, but where Seth went back to Gaza, I went and checked Ashkelon, and then did the pulse of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and the streets being empty, and and went in a different direction. And Seth, playing his part as war correspondent, we sort of covered it in two different ways. So that was my day there.
I had no idea you were here on the day. Wow. I'm sitting here a bit stunned. What you saw. Huh. I think what a lot of people don't realize who don't live here is that it's still October 7th for everyone who lives in Israel. And it's part of who we are. It's part of today's trauma. Hostages are still being held. The trauma of it is just really immense here.
It's interesting. I wrote a piece quite a few months back that Americans, even ones who care deeply, even Jewish Americans and Christian Americans who care very deeply, huge personal ties, as many times as you come in love, and you realize the importance, whether from a religious perspective or security perspective, which is more the hat that I have, that you can't truly empathize with what Israeli people are going through. That it is October 7th every single day. Or that one of my friends, he's 70 years old, and he was called back because he had a Jeep that worked, because so many Jeeps were destroyed on October 7th. So he was back in the Army at age 70. His son was back in an elite unit, drone operator. His daughter was back in intelligence. His son-in-law was on the front lines. His daughter-in-law was home command. And that's normal, if you will, for Israelis, and will go overwhelmingly, back to fight for their country. And I think it's, the tie-in here, what Americans don't get, we're so blessed that we worry about material things. But in Israel, I think they when they do these happiness surveys, they are happier because they are living lives that make a difference and it's meaningful. And they did a survey, I think it was January 2024. So the war is already, going in quite a few months, and things were not so great. And Israel still did well on the worldwide happiness survey, because it didn't mean they were happy in the superficial sense of the word, but I think the word should have been meaningful.
Yeah. For me, living here for 12 and a half years now, not Jewish, not Israeli, maybe not yet. Hopefully I will be one of these days. For me, the whole ethos of embracing life is what makes Israel so wonderful and distinct. It is an ethos that I think is so unique. It's different from anything else in the world, at least that I've encountered. It's a determination to live even when things are bad. We don't wait until we fix things. We don't wait till this war's over. We don't wait till this conflict's over. The conflict goes on, but when we get a break, we live. And it's a really remarkable thing. It's not something I think exists anywhere else in the world. Eric, you are intriguing to me because you are actively involved in interacting with political and other important leaders in the U.S. and in Israel. You're coming over here all the time. You're meeting with officials here, leaders here, and in Washington, D.C. So my question is, because of your unique perspective, how are Israel's wars being viewed by those on each side in the U.S. and in Israel? What commonalities do you see? Where do you see the viewpoints merging or pretty much the same? And where do you see them diverging? Where do you see them different?
By the way, I also travel throughout the Middle East, so I've been to Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Jordan. Seth came with, and Seth and I were in Iraq together. Seth and I were in Egypt together. So I try to get even a broader perspective, and I go and meet with the PA and Fatah, and I actually have met with Hamas. So I'll just tell you a quick aside, because you could.
Please.
I was supposed to be in October 2023 in Gaza, meeting with Hamas at the invitation of the Qatari ambassador for Gaza reconstruction. This is before I met him in May May of 2023. And I said, yes, I accepted to go in. I said, can you guarantee my safety? They said, yes. Fortunately, it didn't happen. But to show you, maybe you can edit this part out that I'm not so bright. But
who is?
So anyhow, getting back to your question.
Right.
So the Israeli and the American people, there are so many, I'll say, subsets. And I think between American Jews, American Christians, within that, there are so many subsets.
True.
In the greater American world, especially after a hyper-polarized election. And then we look at Israel. And how do they look at America? You know, sometimes America is slowing arms sales. Sometimes they're bringing carrier strike groups, bringing the THAAD system. It's very hard to understand where America is. And then the question is where, you know, with the new administration, with the lame duck administration, where it goes. So how one looks at one another in America, I can tell you, is dependent upon the echo chamber that they're in.
True. Yeah, right.
So if they in America watch only MSNBC and listen to PBS and NPR and read the New York Times, that reinforces a certain narrative, and we live in a world where in the news, I'm an opinion writer, but in the news, that it's okay to push an agenda.
Right.
You know, I had actually the Jerusalem bureau chief complain about me of the New York Times to Steve Lindy, because basically I took one of their articles and dissected it. And it wasn't even an incendiary article, but I broke it up showing how you're being manipulated. And he called Steve and he wanted the whole thing to be drawn. And I told Steve he had one question about something, put a hyperlink in and tell him to say, you know, bye-bye. So we live in these echo chambers.
Yeah.
That you reinforce what you think, and then people just recite talking points. So it's not just about domestic politics, it's about foreign politics. And the number one issue, despite being 8 million people or so in Israel, you would think you were 2.7 billion people. You know, Ukraine gets no coverage. You know,
exactly.
The Chinese concentration camps with the Uyghurs gets no coverage. I mean, we can go on and on. Israel is, you would think, is the Gordian knot to untie for great world peace. And then if you're an American Jew who cares about Israel, you know, there is the ones who are old, they think like, I'll differentiate liberal and progressive in America. Liberals, you could be like Joe Biden. He's the last American Democratic president, or probably ever call himself a Zionist. And then you have the progressives who think Israel was born in sin, is a victimizer, an occupier, a colonializer, settler colonialism, that its right to exist not only should be questioned, but because it's stolen other people's land, shouldn't be there anymore. And then they base all of this on total lack of knowledge of the history of the Middle East and its complexities.
Yes.
The five-dimensional part, which is what it is. They look through Western eyes, which gets to both Republican and Democratic administrations that look and say, get this war over with, or whatever it is, and not really understand what the heck's going on. Yeah. So regarding the question about how one looks at one another, for American Jews, and we'll go through concentric circles, I think to a large degree, October 7th was a wake-up call. Most American Jews are secular. Most American Jews, Israel was not in their top 10. For almost 25 years, I was involved in college campuses. For 20 of it, I was involved with Stand With Us, which fought anti-Semitism on campuses. I would tell anybody who would listen about what was going on, the anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism on college campuses. They're saying you're exaggerating. This is not the 1930s, they would tell me. But October 7th was a wake-up call to American Jews, because it wasn't just that Israel was now seen existentially threatened. They also learned that it wasn't just Hamas and Hezbollah, but it was all in Iran. but they realized that their secure place in America, which they thought was different, not an aberration in history, that they were threatened, that their children in elite universities were now subject to something no other minority group would ever get. That when your mezuzah was ripped off, or if you carried an Israeli flag, you can, and there were quite a few who were physically attacked, that there were places in campus you couldn't go to. And all of a sudden, Israel became an issue for many secular American Jews. So in the statistics, which are all over the place post-election, I saw one that even in blue New York, that would be liberal New York,
Right.
45% of Jews voted for Trump. Now,
45%.
I saw that.
Wow.
I saw one of those. Now, I'm still trying to corroborate this because there really are surveys all the other, but there are quite a few battleground states
Right.
that American Jews, secular, who would maybe have never voted Republican before, certainly not with a guy like Donald Trump, maybe with a Romney or something, but that they voted, maybe they held their breath, because all of a sudden Israel, post-October 7th, anti-Semitism all over the world, but it's in their backyards. They hear their neighbors, if there's somebody they know or in the neighborhood has a kippah on, it's being ripped off. They're being sucker punched on New York City subway system. They're screaming all Zionists off. Their world has been turned upside down, and they were oblivious to it. Maybe like the German Jews, between World War I and World War II. And I think they've woken up. And by the way, I've spoken to people on both sides of the aisle. But when the Harris campaign was reaching out to me, as I was talking with a senior advisor, I would say to them, you are letting I'll call it pro-Hamas progressive wing of the party be the tail that's waving the centrist mainstream Democratic dog of Joe Biden. I think it was a surprise to American Jews that, in fact, maybe I'll say American Democrats, that Israelis overwhelmingly were for Donald Trump. And when you looked at the IDI poll, 90% of Israelis 18 to 34 were for Donald Trump.
Wow. Young people.
Now, young people.
They've also been fighting in the IDF. I mean, these are the people out shedding their blood for the country, putting their lives on the line. And so they're seeing these policies work out in not only real life, but in real battle life.
They know that this is not about two states for two peoples. Because why? They could have been a Palestinian state as recently as 2007 with 100% of Gaza and the West Bank land swaps, and East Jerusalem as the capital. Americans looking at Israelis don't understand Israelis. They can't empathize, as we said before, because we don't send our children into war. When was the last American, the average American, who's went into war? Not you, not your parents, maybe your grandfather, maybe did Korea or World War II. So it's ancient history. Remember, the Western mind is all about what happened in the last 15 minutes, something that happened 70 plus years ago. You might as well be talking about the dinosaurs, and so that Western mentality, they cannot understand it. And then when you live utopian, as you do as American young people are ideologically going to be more liberal. And then when they live in, I'll say, cesspools of academia in America, where academia has changed over the last 25 years from places of education and open discourse to places that indoctrinate, that have agendas, that even in mathematics classes, believe it or not, classes, English lit classes, that they are pushing this far left agenda, and the kids come out at best confused, and at worst, very anti-American. They'll start, and then big part of that is anti-Israel, and anti-Semitism tropes play well. and they would never play well on other minority groups.
But we had a big election, a lot of drama, and we're all kind of recovering now, or kind of getting our balance about the outcome. And some are happy, some are very happy, some are very unhappy. It seemed from here, looking at the U.S., that if Kamala had been elected, she probably would have continued to support Israel, but maybe also would have continued to smother its ability to finish the job that needs to be done to protect itself. Whereas the policies of Trump, at least based on his first administration, would perhaps allow Israel to do more. What is Trump's influence before his inauguration? He will be inaugurated on, I think, 20 January. Between now and then, he seems to be already on the move. And at the same time, Biden is still in the White House and can do some things, hopefully some positive things, but he could do some negative things. So what's your take on all this? If you are not yet a subscriber to endtimes.com and would like to see the rest of this important report and others like it, I urge you to subscribe right now at the website endtimes.com. For only $7 a month, you will receive a wealth of information and insight from Jimmy Evans, Mark Hitchcock, and experts from around the world, including Israelis living right here in the Jewish state. Do yourself a favor. Sign up today. Then join me as we consider the impact of President-elect Donald Trump on Israel's wars for survival, especially its war with the Islamic Republic of Iran.